What is going on, guys? Taylor Stuber with Sharp Sports Network, bringing you my Week 5 NFL First Look video. Gonna kind of just go through, maybe make some lineups and stuff for DraftKings and FanDuel. Really just looking at the prices. It's like the first time I've looked at it. I ran through it for about 5 or 10 minutes before, but kind of bring you guys through my process of how I look through these things. But before we get into that, we did just announce just yesterday that our NBA season pass is on sale right now. Includes my cheat sheet, player pool, private chat, private live streams an hour before lock, and then my private lineup construction video, which helps you make your own lineups with my advice for $150, and that includes the preseason, regular season, postseason, includes every single main slate, a ton of the late slates, and a ton of the showdown slates. So $150 for all of that is less than a dollar a day, less than $1 a slate. It's definitely worth the money in my opinion. Members that I had last year are definitely returning already, just because they know how well we did last year, and we plan on doing the same this year. And the winner of last week's giveaway is Nick Odell. For the NBA season pass, all you have to do is DM me on Twitter, and I will get you that pass. And if you want to enter for the giveaway this week, make sure you subscribe, comment below, and then like this video, and you'll be entered for that giveaway every single Monday. And we did just launch an Instagram page, so if you want to follow us over here on Instagram at Sharp Sports Network, we're going to be running a giveaway over here, and then we're also going to be running a giveaway over here on Twitch at Sharp Sports Network. All you got to do is give us a follow, and we'll be doing separate giveaways for all of them. Links are going to be in the description. But enough of that. Let's just get into the Week 5 look. First look. There's a lot of things that I like to look at first. First thing is just going over to Fantasy Labs. I think it's the best tool for looking at Vegas scores and stuff. This is probably going to be one of the most targeted games. And then this Texans-Falcons. And then obviously, kind of interesting to see that the Eagles have such a high team total. They haven't been the best on offense this year, but they are facing a Jets defense who is pretty middle of the road in terms of defense, but it looks like they're going to be without Sam Darnold, so they should be playing with a lead for the majority of the game. Same thing with the Patriots on the road versus the Redskins, another spot you want to look at. And I saw it's funny that the Redskins are slated to be $1,800 this week on DraftKings, below the minimum price. Always interesting to see those kind of things, because see if anybody takes a stab on it. Last week, I kind of considered playing the Dolphins defense on FanDuel for $500 cheaper than everything else, because we saw a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, the Jets defense was one of the cheapest when they played the Patriots, just like the Redskins, and they ended up luck boxing 2 defensive touchdowns. Obviously, you can't project them very highly, but defensive touchdowns are somewhat random. And so sometimes I like to spend down on defenses. Like last week, one of my top defenses of the slate was the Carolina Panthers against the Texans at $2,300, and they ended up being one of the highest scoring defenses on the slate. So never be scared to pay down for a defense if you have to. If it helps you get better positional players, I think that's definitely worth it, especially in cash games. But just going through it, it looks like Wentz is only 6,100 versus the Jets, projected for 28 points, the second highest projected team total on the slate. I like that. Andy Dalton, I'm making this video after the Monday night game, so it's gonna sound gross, but he is at home against Arizona, who's one of the worst defenses in the league. Arizona has the highest pace though, at 23. They run a play every 23.3 seconds, which is far and away the fastest team in the league. Carolina shortly behind, so a big pace up game for the Cincinnati Bengals, who are already a decently fast team up here at the 6th fastest team. So this should be a pretty fast-paced game. So it makes me like guys like Andy Dalton. I think he's all right. Over here on FanDuel, he's 7,500. I think I would prefer Kyler Murray for 7,400, because we just saw Mason Rudolph torch them. And I think Kyler Murray gets it done. He has been running a bit more than usual as of late. Had 8 attempts 2 weeks ago for 69 yards, nice, and then 4 attempts last week for 27 yards and a rushing touchdown. If he can get this rushing going, it's really going to lift his upside. They are going to be without Christian Kirk this week, this week, which is depressing. It's not good for them because in order to run this offense that they're running, they need a ton of talent, and they were already kind of lacking it with only DJ Fitz being super old, and then Christian Kirk, while I think is good, he's not out of this world talent, at least yet, more of a prospect in my eyes, and it looks like they rose Larry Fitzgerald price just because of that. Only received 5 targets last week. The first 2 weeks were kind of unreal, him getting 13 and 11 targets, but slowly dipped to 7 and 5. Curious to see what they do. One of my favorite plays on the slate already that I'm looking at is David Johnson, only 7.5K over here, and then on FanDuel it's just some abysmal pricing. Granted, it's FanDuel, so it's only half point PPR, so I don't like him nearly as much on here, but his price is so enticing at 6.8K. We saw what the Steelers did just today versus, or on Monday night, whenever you're watching this video, what they did with their running backs versus Cincinnati, who is such a sieve on defense when allowing catches to running backs. James Conner, 8 targets for 8 catches for 83 yards and a touchdown. Jalen Samuels, 8 targets for 8 catches for 57 yards. Benny Snell got 1 target, no catches. So 7 out of the 17 targets from the running backs yesterday, they had 16 catches for 130 yards, or 140 yards rather, and a touchdown. So we know David Johnson is playing the majority of the snaps this year. Let's look at it a bit deeper, because now that they don't have Christian Kirk, it's even more interesting. He was already 3rd on the team in targets, and you take away Christian Kirk, who led the team in targets, running a ton of routes for David Johnson. And if you take away that week 2 game where he got injured, he might be leading this team in targets. He had that wrist injury week 2, which made him exit early, and he only ended up getting 1 target. But the other games where he was completely healthy, he got 7 targets, 9 targets, 11 targets. It's hard for me not to like this guy on DraftKings. The only problem with it would be that the opportunity cost. Every week, Christian McCaffrey's only 8.7K. He should be 9.5K or higher. I know it is a tougher defense in Jacksonville, but unless it's a super elite defense, nothing really scares me off of it. Let's look at what their team total is right now. Carolina 22.25, so not terrible, but he is just so game script proof. It's incredible. If they're up by a lot, it's gonna be because of him, and then they're gonna use him to salt the game away. If they're behind, they're gonna pass to him to catch up. There's just so many scenarios where he can get it done. He's getting so many targets, and I think having Kyle Allen in there rather than Cam Newton is just a huge upgrade, just because Cam was injured. Not that I think Kyle Allen is necessarily better when they're both healthy, but it was clear that Cam wasn't healthy the first 2 weeks. And they're kind of leaning on Christian McCaffrey. Obviously has a big play potential in the 76-yard touchdown he got 2 weeks ago. Just getting absurd amounts of targets. See, and it was a 16-10 game. And he still scored 33.9 fantasy points over here. And it's kind of like the situation a couple years ago when it was team jamming men, and you would just jam in David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell, and Christian McCaffrey is just like that. You want to jam him in, and 8.7K is just simply too cheap. Another opportunity cost situation, because that might take me off David Johnson more, is that Ezekiel Elliott's only 8.3K facing a Green Bay defense. Well, with granted, they have been a lot better this year. They are going to be without Devontae Adams, so I project them to lose this game pretty handily unless Aaron Rodgers can pull something out of his ass. Hasn't been necessarily that great this year, and now he's without his number 1 target. Yeah, they're home favorites, projected by 3.5 points, projected for 25.25 points. Ezekiel Elliott's one of my favorite plays. I think a good route this week, just looking ahead, is playing Christian McCaffrey and Zeke. We saw that the game was only 10-12 last week, and he still managed to get 17.5 points. Very involved in the through the air, having 7 targets, 6 catches off of it. And I know a lot of people were worried about Tony Pollard kind of stealing usage and snaps away from him, but it's just simply not the case in competitive games. The week before against Miami, they just blew the doors off, and they didn't need him nearly as much. We'll go look at the snap share of Dallas last week in a competitive game. that they ended up losing, but it was still competitive throughout the game. He ended up playing 97% of the snaps. This is what's going to happen this week against Green Bay. I don't expect them to destroy Green Bay, but I expect them to keep the game competitive. And now 3 weeks after his holdout as well, or 4 weeks rather now, it just seems like he's going to be an every down back like we expected. I don't expect much from Tony Pollard. And Alawale is more used as a fullback, which is even better for Zeke in certain situations. So yeah, putting in guys like this, it just seems like a no-brainer. An interesting thing that we're going to have to monitor throughout the week is the Melvin Gordon situation. We thought that he was going to play last week, but then we found out shortly before the game that it was going to be more of an emergency thing. Now it looks like he's for sure going to get in the game this week. A tougher matchup against Denver, but again, Denver really not as good as they have been in years past. So if Melvin Gordon's supposed to play that Justin Jackson role for at least this week, and Eckler's going to play what he has been doing the first 3 or 4 weeks, him at 6.7K is the biggest lock on the slate. That's just definitely something to monitor, and it's going to dictate a lot on this slate. Le'Veon Bell, I saw that I think he is top 10 in touches already this year, and he had a bye week last week. Now he's 6.8K. He's pretty game script proof. He plays them like almost all of the snaps, has super high touchdown equity. It's just I think they're going to struggle to move the ball, but he is going to get a ton of targets in the game when they're trailing. It's pretty inevitable against the Eagles, as they are 2 touchdown dogs. Move down a little bit. Aaron Jones, 5.9K, one of the better plays on the slate. It's going to be a tough decision between him and Wayne Gallman. The Giants have a way tougher matchup. They are at home, though, against Minnesota. Wayne Gallman is just playing that role that Saquon Barkley did. It's weird to say because the talent difference is so significant, but I think it's kind of overblown with how bad people think that Wayne Gallman is. We go look at the snap share that he had last week. Ended up only playing 60% of the snaps, but he got the majority of the workload, and a lot of that had to do with them just getting out to such a big lead. If the game was competitive, which it could be in this game against Minnesota, let's look at the spread right now. If I can find it, that I pass it. They are 4.5 point dogs, still projected for 20.25, so just under 3 touchdowns. It's interesting to see what happens here. Another thing with Wayne Gallman, though, is that he's game script proof. We saw even with the lead that he got 7 targets, 6 catches for 55 yards and a touchdown on that, 18 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown. So he only played 60% of the snaps, but he got 24 touches. So that's something you want to see, and he is game script proof. So 5.4K, I like that a lot. But it's going to be hard not to play Aaron Jones over him if I'm playing McCaffrey and Ezekiel Elliott, because we saw that last week. Jamal Williams got absolutely destroyed. You hate to see that kind of thing. But the backfield is totally Aaron Jones now. The first 3 weeks he played 59%, 58%, 39%, splitting all of the time with Jamal Williams. Then we saw him play 84% after Jamal Williams got hurt in that first quarter. Ended up getting a ton of targets. I think he got 7 last week. Let's look at this. He had 7 targets for 6 catches, 13 carries for 21 yards, had a rushing touchdown. And that's kind of the thing the one good thing that he's had this year is that he's been scoring touchdowns despite that week 1 blunder of a game. Playing a Dallas defense, which is pretty good, but for 5.9K, going to be playing, I would expect 85-90% of the snaps. The Green Bay Packers are projected for 21.75 points. Game script proof again, another guy like this that is going to be in the receiving game if they need him, and they probably will in this game. I think this game is a bit higher score than we saw last week between New Orleans and the Cowboys. I think this 47 over-under is interesting to bet the over on. Even with Devontae Adams out, we're going to put more emphasis on the running game and maybe Aaron Jones out of the backfield. So that's kind of the running backs. The wide receivers, it's really interesting this week. I think the biggest mispricing on the entire week is Michael Thomas at 6.6K over here on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he is 7.7K. It's not nearly as bad as a mispricing, but it's still pretty awful. The Saints have one of the best projected team totals on the slate this week at 25.25 against the Bucks, who the Bucks I think are going to be able to keep up, because it seems like Jameis Winston's kind of figuring out this this Bruce Arians offense finally. 47.5 point over under. I like that team total, or that over under. I don't know if I'm gonna bet the over yet, but 47.5 is a lofty number. But we look at the air yards and target distribution for New Orleans. Even with Teddy Bridgewater in, it's really not that big of a concern. We saw that he did very well last week. He leads the team with 42 targets, a 31% target share, but obviously that's not really telling, because the first 2 weeks they had Drew Brees, or 1.5 weeks they had Drew Brees. Teddy Bridgewater playing with Michael Thomas the last 2 weeks, he still has 16 targets, 120 air yards, which is really good, a 28% target share. He's just simply underpriced. Playing this Bucks defense, that's not good. They've been playing way over their heads. They are decent against the run, which plays in the favor of Michael Thomas, because if they're not going to be able to run the ball, which they've been struggling to run the ball even with Alvin Kamara, it should be a big game for Michael Thomas, and he's just simply underpriced. Probably going to be one of the highest owned players on the slate, like him quite a bit. Spoke about Larry Fitzgerald earlier. Without Christian Kirk, it's going to be him and David Johnson getting a large load of the targets. So I don't think that's a too terrible of a price at 6K. I think you could probably find some better options there. Marquez Valdes-Scantling at 5.6K without Devontae Adams. When you look at the target share over there, I know that he is leading the team in targets outside of Devontae Adams. Is that the first 2 weeks? He has 28 targets to Devontae Adams 36. Devontae Adams obviously going to miss this game, so I think a lot of that is going to go to guys like him and Geronimo Allison, which surprisingly Geronimo Allison last week started getting it going finally, played 79% of the snaps. Some of that had to do with Devontae Adams exiting the game early, but I think we're going to see a lot of Scantling, a lot of Geronimo Allison, and they are going to be trailing this game, but I think the game stays relatively competitive, so I like playing guys in this game. So at 5K, it's not the worst. He ended up getting only 4 targets last week, 3 and 4 the weeks before, and they completely blanked week 1, which was super weird. I think he's going to be a bit high owned just because he scored that touchdown last week, and people are going to see that he's cheaper than Scantling, and he performed better last week just because of the touchdown. But I think I prefer a guy like Scantling for 600 more. Look over the pricing over here on FanDuel. Scantling's at 6.3K. Don't mind that. Might prefer Josh Gordon to that. And then Geronimo Allison, maybe they got him real cheap over here. I haven't even really looked. 5.6K. See, that's a really interesting price. I think I might still prefer Marquez Valdes-Scantling to Allison, but it's definitely worth a look. Give tight ends a quick look before we wrap up this video. I think Darren Waller at 5,000 is just incredibly too cheap. I know they're playing Chicago. Their over-under can't be high, but it doesn't really matter to me. 18.25 currently. Going to be trailing the game. They are at home. We thought they were going to struggle last week versus the Colts, but they ended up doing fairly well and ended up winning that game pretty handily. But it's just absurd. We'll go to all the teams and we'll look at tight ends that have the highest target share on their teams. Darren Waller, 29% target share. Next closest is guys like Zach Ertz, George Kittle, Evan Ingram, and he's way above them. It's just, I want to play Darren Waller every week. Had a lot of them last week. He didn't do the best. He still hasn't found the end zone this year, but he continues to get 7, 6, 13, 7 catches on 8, 7, 14, 8 targets. It's just somewhere I want to keep going back to until they raise his price to something. It should be at around 6K. He should be up here with Ertz. He should be up here with Evan Ingram. So he's just simply underpriced. I like him quite a bit. It's looking like a lot of people are going to go to Tyler Eifert this week. Playing this Arizona team, you got to look at the flow chart. I did fade Will Dissly. I'm going to admit I faded Will Dissly last week. I I didn't think that the Seahawks were going to have to pass that much, and they didn't really pass that much. Just a larger target share than normal went to him. Tyler Lockett really just shit the bed that game, didn't get many targets. It was just the Will Dissly show. Kind of got buried because of that, but it is what it is. Arizona Cardinals this year allowing 29.3 DK points per game. Now, he's only playing about half the snaps right now and running about half the routes. So when he's out there, he's running routes. So him only having 50% target share or snap share isn't that big of a deal. He splits a lot of time with Uzoma, which is completely unplayable. Outside of week 1 when he had 5 targets, he's been a complete bust. He's just used as a blocker. So I think Tyler Eifert at 3.3K is going to be very popular. Undecided if I think I like him or not. If he does become popular over the week, a good pivot I think is Dallas Goedert at 2.9K against the Jets, second highest team total on the slate. Dallas Goedert finally healthy. We look at the snaps that the Eagles are running, because without Deshaun Jackson, which I'm assuming as of right now that he's going to miss this game, they want to play their best players, and that's going to be Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. And in order to do that, you're going to need to play a lot of 12 personnel, run 2 tight ends out there. That's why you see 76% of the snaps for Ertz, 69% percent of snaps for Dallas Goedert. They overlap because they play a lot of 2 tight end sets. I know he missed this game obviously, and then it looked like he was just still banged up for this one, but it looked like he was back to full health this game. So I would expect about a 70% snap share for Dallas Goedert this week, and he received 3 targets last week. Obviously a menace in the red zone, huge touchdown target. So at 2.9K, I think he's worth a dart throw if you're trying to save some money and pivot off of a guy like Tyler Eifert, which I think could be pretty chalky after that Will Dissly week just last week. In the same vein, Zach Ertz, I think they're going to play him a lot. Deshaun Jackson should miss this game. Going to continue getting these 7-8 targets, probably a bit more. So I do like these guys quite a bit. I would like Evan Ingram, has one of the highest target shares out of tight ends for his respective team. It is a tougher matchup against Minnesota. They should be trailing. I still believe in Daniel Jones. Obviously, he did what he had to do last week. He didn't have to do much. Wayne Gallman pretty much took over that game. But that's pretty much my first look thought. If you guys like these videos, please drop a like, leave some positive feedback, any feedback in the comments. I really appreciate that. Interested to see what you guys think of these videos. I'm going to start doing these every single week. And again, if you want to enter that giveaway, all you have to do is subscribe, like this video, and then comment below with your favorite play of the day, or any feedback at all. So yeah, I hope you guys do well this week. Make sure to follow me on Twitch. I'm going to be going live as much as I possibly can, which could be any given day. Probably going to do it on Tuesday when you're watching this video. So anyways, best of luck this week, and until next time, peace.